Imagine an intricate, fail-deadly command system designed to launch nuclear weapons automatically if a nation's central leadership is killed.
Right. It sounds exactly like Cold War fiction.
Yeah, something straight out of a 1960s thriller. But as of this month, that mechanism is the ratified constitutional law of North Korea. Good morning and welcome to this deep dive. I'm your host, and today we are looking at a fundamentally altered geopolitical landscape.
We really are. It's a completely new board.
Exactly. We're analyzing how a localized standoff on the Korean Peninsula has transformed into a multi-theater global challenge in just a matter of weeks.
And, our objective today is to provide a calm, highly professional analysis of these current events. We're here to deliver the facts and assess the various courses of action impartially, without generating any unnecessary alarm.
Right, because there's already enough panic out there. And to achieve that level of objectivity, this intelligence synthesis is brought to you by ProWave AI, and it's generated by Stylo News. So if you're tracking the situation in East Asia, you are getting unique access this morning.
Definitely. Stylo News is actually the consumer application derived from Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is pretty heavy-duty stuff, right?
Yeah, it's a system engineered specifically to support enterprise operations, military planners, and global decision makers. So we're applying that exact same analytical rigor today to our focus, which is North Korea as the next strategic flashpoint.
Just to set the parameters for you, the listener, today is the 24th of June, 2026. Our mission today covers the intelligence estimates and news reporting from the past 2 weeks, so that's June 7th through June 20th.
Right. We will impartially evaluate the primary patterns of events, the localized and global impacts, the perspectives of the key decision makers, and what the data indicates are the most probable courses of action.
So let's just dive right in. Let's begin with the diplomatic shifts that have basically redefined the baseline. When you look at the data from the last fortnight, there's one event that acts as the catalyst for everything else.
The summit.
Yep. Exactly. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Pyongyang on June 8th and 9th, and this was his first state visit there in 7 years. But the most critical data point from that summit wasn't a statement. It was an omission.
Yeah, there was zero public discussion of denuclearization.
None. Which is huge.
It's a definitive policy pivot. I mean, for decades, Beijing's official stance, at least rhetorically aligned with the international consensus that the Korean Peninsula must be denuclearized.
Right.
By dropping that demand, China is, well, they're signaling a tacit acceptance of North Korea as a permanent nuclear weapons state.
I am really stuck on this transition, though. Historically, Beijing has always viewed a nuclear-armed neighbor as a deeply destabilizing variable.
Absolutely.
So why abandon the push for disarmament now? Like, what specifically changed in Xi Jinping's calculus to make him accept a nuclear Pyongyang?
Well, the broader competition with Washington has essentially superseded regional non-proliferation goals. From Beijing's perspective, applying severe pressure on Pyongyang right now might lead to regime collapse.
Which would be a disaster for them.
Right, because that could put U.S. and South Korean forces directly on the Chinese border. Alternatively, a capable, nuclear-armed North Korea acts as an aggressive strategic buffer. It complicates American military planning and forces the United States to commit substantial naval and air assets to the Pacific just to manage the deterrence.
Which then reduces the resources Washington can project elsewhere.
Precisely. And Pyongyang immediately capitalized on that diplomatic cover.
Yeah, we saw them parade their weapons, but more importantly, they rewrote their internal laws. The recent constitutional amendments formally institutionalized nuclear weapons as the core of their national defense.
They officially declared their nuclear status irreversible.
Irreversible. And the rhetoric from the leadership really reflects this hardened posture. Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, publicly categorized any American calls for a resumption of denuclearization talks as hallucinations.
Which is a strong word choice. But the operational detail requiring the most analytical focus here is their implementation of a decentralized nuclear command.
Okay, wait, let's break down the mechanics of that, because the phrase decentralized command carries massive implications. Are we talking about an automated, computer-driven system like the old Soviet dead hand network? Or has the regime literally handed physical launch codes to lower-level military generals in the field?
The intelligence suggests it is a combination of pre-delegated authority and physical protocol. So if the central command node in Pyongyang is severed specifically, if leadership is decapitated and a preemptive strike authority to execute retaliatory strikes automatically transfers to designated regional commanders.
Wow. That significantly alters the risk profile.
By pre-delegating that authority, they are intentionally increasing the risk of a miscalculation by a field commander.
Yes, to guarantee retaliation. It is a terrifying deterrent, and they are backing it up by securing a seat within a much larger geopolitical bloc. The intelligence shows a robust new alignment with Russia, moving well beyond just symbolic friendship. Yeah, it's like North Korea has stopped playing the role of the isolated rogue state and just secured a seat on a new geopolitical board of directors with China and Russia.
That's a great analogy. North Korea is actively providing troops, artillery munitions, and defense industrial support to Moscow.
And the transactions are highly reciprocal, Shai.
Very. In exchange for supplying the Russian war effort, North Korea receives desperately needed hard currency, energy subsidies, and advanced military technology.
Which likely includes aerospace and satellite guidance systems.
Exactly. This drastically reduces Pyongyang's diplomatic and economic isolation.
So let's examine the economic impact of that arrangement, because there is a severe duality inside North Korea right now. Inside the capital city of Pyongyang, intelligence points to new urban development and a visible influx of consumer goods for the regime's elite.
But outside the capital, the reality remains completely dire. Severe poverty and chronic food insecurity are persistent facts of life for the majority of the population.
Because the regime is heavily prioritizing military expansion over civilian infrastructure.
Right. As an example, Kim Jong-un recently mandated a 2.5-time increase in the production of Hwasong-11 tactical ballistic missiles.
Okay, I have to challenge the economics of this production surge, though. If this is a nation dealing with widespread poverty and they are suddenly pouring immense capital into tripling their ballistic missile output, how are they mechanically surviving the international sanctions architecture designed specifically to starve those programs of funding?
Well, the sanctions architecture relies on the unified enforcement of major global powers, particularly through the global banking system. What we are seeing now is structural sanctions evasion, facilitated directly by Moscow and Beijing.
So this isn't just basic smuggling.
No, not at all. It involves sophisticated dark fleets. You have oil tankers turning off their tracking transponders and conducting ship-to-ship transfers at night. Yeah. Furthermore, trade is being cleared using regional banking networks, rubles, or digital currencies that completely bypass the U.S. dollar and a SWIFT financial messaging system. The economic wall built around North Korea basically has massive state-sponsored doors now.
And that flow of resources naturally forces neighboring nations to adjust their defensive postures. Looking at the regional reactions over the past 2 weeks, the United States just approved a $300 million sale of advanced air-to-air missiles to South Korea.
Meanwhile, Japan has announced its largest defense expansion since the end of World War II.
Which is huge.
It is. Japan's expansion is particularly notable because it involves acquiring counter-strike capabilities. They are investing heavily in long-range cruise missiles designed to hit enemy launch sites before a weapon can be fired at Japanese territory.
That fundamentally alters their post-war pacifist defense doctrine.
Completely. And when you pull back to look at the global board, this localized buildup is mirroring a very alarming international trend. We are effectively in the early stages of a renewed multipolar nuclear arms race.
The data definitely supports that assessment. The latest figures show 9,745 operational nuclear warheads globally.
And with the expiration of the New START treaty between the U.S. and Russia earlier this year, in February, the primary legal guardrails limiting strategic arsenals are just gone.
Right. 9 separate nations are actively modernizing or expanding their nuclear capabilities simultaneously.
Which is mechanically much less stable than the two-player dynamic of the Cold War. When you have 9 different nations factoring into the deterrence math, the variables for miscalculation multiply exponentially.
Absolutely. So to understand how we navigate this, we have to map out the specific objectives of the key decision makers. We already established that Xi Jinping wants a strategic buffer and Putin needs an industrial base for artillery. What is Kim Jong-un's ultimate endgame here?
Regime survival remains his paramount objective, but the methodology has evolved. He has officially abandoned the decades-old national goal of reunification with South Korea.
Right, which is a massive shift.
It is. His strategy now relies on absolute strategic autonomy. He wants to manage a permanently divided peninsula from a position of unassailable military strength.
And that requires a major policy adjustment from the West. Let's look at the perspectives of South Korea and the United States. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is advocating for a phased approach. He wants to maintain formidable military deterrence while simultaneously keeping diplomatic channels open.
And in Washington, President Donald Trump, capitalizing on the momentum of a recent ceasefire agreement with Iran, has signaled a willingness to engage directly with Kim Jong-un again.
The critical analytical takeaway here is the shift away from CVA, right?
Yeah.
Complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization.
Exactly. For years, the absolute baseline demand from Washington and Seoul was that Pyongyang dismantle its nuclear infrastructure before any sanctions relief could occur.
But that demand always seemed fundamentally incompatible with Kim's survival strategy. So how does this new phased approach actually work in practice? Like, what is the mechanical difference between what we used to demand and what is being discussed now?
Well, CVI required physical inspections, the dismantling of centrifuges, and the surrender of warheads. The phased approach being evaluated now focuses primarily on a cap and freeze.
A cap and freeze.
Right. The immediate diplomatic goal is simply to halt the production of new fissile material, so plutonium and highly enriched uranium, and to pause further ballistic missile testing. You do not ask them to surrender what they already have. You negotiate to freeze the arsenal at its current size.
Does this mean the international community is quietly admitting that total denuclearization is a dead dream, and they're just trying to manage a new normal?
Essentially, yes. It is a pivot from absolute elimination to pragmatic risk management. When a state achieves a decentralized command structure and secures the economic backing of superpowers like Russia and China, demanding total disarmament is no longer a viable diplomatic starting point.
That makes sense. But while the geopolitical strategists are quietly maneuvering for this leverage, the general public is reading the headlines. And the public sentiment tells a remarkably different story. We looked at the data from Stylo Intel Ops, which analyzed a massive volume of social media traffic, specifically on X, over the past 2 weeks.
And the dominant sentiment is overwhelmingly negative and alarmist, accounting for 72% of the total conversation.
72%. People are terrified, and they're latching on to specific, highly aggressive rhetoric. The term doomsday mandate has gone viral, driven by the news of that decentralized command structure we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the public interprets the pre-delegation of launch authority as a hair trigger for an accidental nuclear war.
Furthermore, the rhetoric connecting different theaters of conflict is really amplifying public anxiety. North Korea recently issued statements threatening to target Washington or Tel Aviv if Allied forces were to attack Iran.
Which is technically improbable for North Korea to strike Tel Aviv, but the rhetoric successfully merges the anxieties of the Middle East conflict with the nuclear tensions in East Asia.
Exactly. There is deep frustration online regarding what users perceive as Western passivity. They see Kim Jong-un expanding his rocket forces unchecked, and they feel the deterrence strategy is failing.
And that reaction is a very predictable response to the visible aggressive signaling from Pyongyang. However, our sentiment analysis also isolated a minority perspective. Approximately 9% of the conversation is categorized as neutral or cautiously analytical.
Let's examine that 9%. Who is looking at this escalation neutrally?
This demographic primarily consists of independent geopolitical analysts and academics discussing a concept termed sovereign realism.
Sovereign realism, okay.
Right. They are objectively evaluating Pyongyang's multipolar opportunism. They point out how effectively a small, heavily sanctioned state has maneuvered between major global powers to secure its own survival and elevate its status.
That's a very detached way to look at it.
It is. Additionally, some within this group actually place the responsibility for the heightened tensions on the United States and South Korea, arguing that joint military exercises create predictable provocation cycles that force North Korea to react.
Reading through these social media reports is honestly like watching a pot boil over. The public is terrified of the raw threat, while the geopolitical chefs in the kitchen are calmly debating the recipe.
That is an accurate assessment of the disparity between public perception and intelligence analysis. The public reacts to the intent of the messaging, while the intelligence community evaluates the physical capabilities and the logistical reality.
So let's cut through the surface noise and look at those deep-sea currents. Based on the intelligence estimates from the past 2 weeks, what actually happens next? Or are we looking at the onset of a major regional war?
Based on medium to high confidence intelligence estimates, no. A deliberate, full-scale attack on South Korea remains highly unlikely in the near term.
What specific metrics lead the intelligence community to that conclusion, though?
We rely on a concept known as negative tactical warning.
Which means looking for what isn't there.
Precisely. To initiate a general war, a military must conduct massive, highly visible logistical preparations. We are actively monitoring for these indicators, and they are absent.
So no large-scale troop mobilizations heading toward the demilitarized zone.
Right. We are not seeing the dispersal of artillery shells from deep underground storage to active firing lines. We are not seeing blood drives at military hospitals, and there are no civil defense or evacuation protocols being enacted within North Korean cities.
Because the gears of war require fuel, ammunition, and medical staging. If they were planning an invasion for next week, our satellites would see those logistical gears turning today.
Correct. The overarching objective of the Kim regime is survival. Initiating a conventional war against the combined military capabilities of South Korea and the United States would almost certainly result in the total destruction of that regime. It runs counter to their primary goal.
Yet they are still manufacturing missiles, and they're still issuing threats. If the intelligence rules out a full-scale war, what is the actual strategic threat you, the listener, should be prepared for?
The most probable course of action is an intelligence concept called calibrated coercion.
Let's define calibrated coercion. This means pushing the boundaries and creating friction just enough to extract political or economic concessions, but carefully stopping short of the threshold that would trigger a military response from the U.S. or South Korea.
Yes, exactly. Pyongyang has a long-established operational pattern of utilizing localized coercive acts to shape international negotiations, test the cohesion of the U.S. South Korean alliance, and project an image of strength to their domestic audience.
So if you are watching the news cycle over the coming weeks, what specific events should you expect to see? What does calibrated coercion look like in practice?
You should anticipate a resumption of both ballistic and cruise missile tests, likely demonstrating new technical capabilities. Expect maritime harassment along the northern limit line.
That's the disputed maritime border in the Yellow Sea, right?
Yes, where we have historically seen deadly naval skirmishes. You will also likely see instances of GPS jamming affecting civilian shipping and aviation, sophisticated cyber operations targeting financial institutions or infrastructure, and localized friction along the heavily fortified border.
These are actions specifically designed to be highly visible and highly disruptive.
They are engineered to normalize North Korea's expanded military status through constant low-level friction. The strategy is to become a pressing, immediate issue that the international community simply cannot afford to ignore, thereby forcing negotiations on Pyongyang's terms.
So the takeaway here is not to prepare for an immediate invasion, but to expect a lot of loud, coercive noise in the headlines as North Korea tries to force diplomatic concessions.
That is the most precise and objective reading of the current strategic board.
Staying informed on these rapidly developing global events requires tools that strip away the hyperbole and present the facts objectively. And the analysis we walked through today was entirely powered by the Stylo News application.
It is an exceptionally capable system for synthesizing complex geopolitical data.
It really is. Stylo News is a mobile and computer app that you can download and customize for your own personal use. It allows you to build intelligence-style briefs pulling from hundreds of traditional news reporting sources, as well as real-time data from X.
It's designed to give you the objective facts, different perspectives, and the underlying sentiment, entirely without bias.
Exactly. So we highly encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News to get AI-powered news on demand. Just visit www.stylonews.com.
It provides a level of clarity that is just essential in today's information environment.
It really does. Well, we want to sincerely thank you for joining us for this morning's deep dive. We always value the opportunity to explore these complex global architectures with you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Please feel free to request topics for future deep dives. Let us know what regions or strategic shifts you want us to unpack next. And be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final structural thought to consider.
Sure, go ahead.
If North Korea has successfully rewritten the rules of international security, if they have normalized their nuclear status, effectively bypassed global economic sanctions, and secured their own regime survival by strategically aligning with other superpowers, what is to stop other non-nuclear nations from studying that exact playbook?
Wow.
Yeah. Will the 2030s be the decade where we witness a dozen new nuclear states emerge?
That is a very sobering question to consider as we watch the multipolar world take shape. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time.